I'll call this Breaking Free, the Architecture of a Secret. Hi, my name is Alex Bennett. If you met me 3 years ago in Crestwood, you would have seen a 19-year-old kid who looked like he had his life figured out. I was a sophomore at the local university, majoring in psychology. Ironic, I know. And I spent my weekends either working at the campus library or grabbing coffee with a girl I was seeing named Claire. I had a quick smile and a reputation for being the guy who always had his assignments turned in 48 hours early. But every architect knows that a building can look pristine on the outside, while the internal plumbing is corroding. For me, that corrosion started around 11 o'clock every night. When the house went quiet and my roommates were asleep, the shadow would settle in. I struggled with a compulsive addiction to masturbation. I know. Even saying it out loud feels like a social landmine. We live in a world that over-sexualizes everything, but talks about the mechanics of addiction with a panicked whisper. It started as a pressure release valve. Freshman year was a meat grinder of exams and social anxiety. I found that in the silence of my room, I could find a 10-second burst of dopamine that made the world go quiet. But soon the valve got stuck open. It wasn't about pleasure anymore, it was about sedation. I began to plan my day around those moments of solitude. I'd skip a morning lecture, not because I was tired, but because the itch was there. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I'd be at dinner with Claire, and while she was telling me about her day, I was mentally calculating how soon I could leave so I could go home and be alone with my vice. The shame was a physical weight. It felt like a gray film over my eyes. I'd look in the mirror and think, is this all you are? I felt like a fraud. I was the good kid everyone trusted, but I was living a double life in the dark. The digital lifeline. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a whimper. It was a Tuesday night in November. I had spent 4 hours in a cycle of relapse and self-loathing. I felt hollow, physically exhausted and mentally drained. I was scrolling through social media at 3 a.m., my eyes stinging, when I saw a post from an account dedicated to dopamine fasting and mental health. It wasn't a preachy post. It was just a simple graphic that said, your brain is a landscape. If you walk the same path of habit every day, you carve a trench you can't climb out of alone. Beneath it was a link to a virtual support group called the Horizon Project. My heart felt like a trapped bird. I hovered the cursor over the sign up button for 20 minutes. What if someone recognizes me? What if they record the meeting? But then I looked at the mess of my desk and the exhaustion in my reflection. The fear of staying the same finally became greater than the fear of being seen. I signed up. The first virtual meeting felt like a high-stakes interrogation. I sat in my darkened room, my webcam covered with a piece of tape, heart hammering against my ribs. There were 12 black boxes on the screen. Then a man named Marcus started to speak. He was 35, an architect from Chicago. He talked about how his compulsion had cost him his marriage. He didn't use clinical terms. He talked about the loneliness of it. I wasn't addicted to the act, Marcus said, his voice steady but raw. I was addicted to the 5 minutes of not feeling like a failure. The tape came off my webcam. I didn't say anything that first night, but I listened. I heard from a 20-year-old athlete, a 60-year-old grandfather, and a nursing student. The common thread wasn't perversion. It was a desperate search for comfort in a world that felt too loud. For the first time in 3 years, the gray film over my eyes started to thin. I wasn't a monster. I was a person with a maladaptive coping mechanism. The rewiring. Recovery isn't a montage in a movie. It's a slow, grueling war of attrition. Inspired by the group, I started what I called the reconstruction. I had to change the geography of my life. I realized that my desk was a trigger. My phone was a trigger. Being bored at 2 p.m. was a trigger. I started small. I bought a physical alarm clock and moved my phone to the kitchen at night. That first week was agonizing. The silence was loud. I felt a restlessness in my bones that made me want to crawl out of my skin. To fill the void, I took up long-distance running. I remember the first time I hit the wall at mile 4. My lungs were burning, my legs were heavy, and suddenly I realized I was feeling real physical pain instead of emotional numbness. It was the most alive I had felt in years. I also dove into mindfulness. I learned to urge surf. When the impulse hit, instead of fighting it or giving in, I would sit on my floor and just observe it. Okay, Alex, your heart is racing, your palms are sweaty. This is just a chemical surge. It will peak and it will recede. The lesson: you don't beat an addiction. You outgrow it by building a life that is too big to fit inside the old habits. The power of the tribe. The guys in the group became my brothers. We had a group chat that was active 24/7. When I felt like I was going to slip, I'd send a single emoji, a red light. Within seconds, my phone would buzz. Go for a walk, Alex. Do 10 push-ups. Call me. We celebrated day 30 like it was a grand opening of a skyscraper. We mourned setbacks with grace. I learned that shame thrives in secrecy, but it dies in the light of community. I started a blog, The Architecture of Recovery. I wrote about the science of dopamine, the psychology of shame, and the beauty of a clear mind. To my surprise, the comments weren't filled with trolls. They were filled with people saying, "Me too." The summit. Last month, I did something I never thought possible. I hosted a mental health symposium at my university. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of faces, some I recognized, many I didn't, I felt a strange sense of peace. I talked about the shadow. I talked about the dark nights in Crestwood. I told them that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's the ultimate structural reinforcement. I'm still Alex Bennett. I still get stressed. I still feel the pull of the old trenches sometimes. But now I have a different blueprint. I have a community. I have a partner who knows my truth and loves me for my honesty, not my facade. To anyone listening who feels like they are drowning in a secret, the water isn't as deep as you think. You just have to be brave enough to stand up and say, "I'm struggling." Your story isn't a tragedy. It's a work in progress, and the view from the other side is more beautiful than I can put into words. The anatomy of the urge. When I first started, I thought mindfulness was about emptying the mind or reaching some state of Zen-like calm. I was wrong. For an addict, mindfulness is actually a form of tactical observation. It's about becoming a scientist of your own discomfort. I developed a 3-step system that I called the structural inspection. Whenever the shadows started to creep in, I would stop whatever I was doing and go through this sequence. 1. The halt check. Before I did anything, I would ask myself 4 questions. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? 9 times out of 10, the urge wasn't actually about a physical need for the act. It was a signal that my body was depleted. If I was lonely, I called Leo. If I was tired, I closed my eyes for 10 minutes. I stopped treating the symptom and started treating the cause. 2. Urge surfing. My mentor in the support group taught me this. He told me to imagine the urge as a wave in the ocean. If you try to stand still and block a wave, it will knock you over. If you give in, you drown. But if you get on a surfboard, you can ride it until it peters out on the shore. I would sit on the edge of my bed, feet flat on the floor, and set a timer for 10 minutes. I'd close my eyes and narrate the sensation in my head. I feel a tightness in my chest. My breath is shallow. My thoughts are racing toward the old habit. I see the thought, but I am not the thought. I am the observer watching the wave. It was a revelation. I realized that an urge usually only lasts about 15 to 30 minutes if you don't feed it. If I could survive 30 minutes of discomfort, I won the day. 3. The sensory grounding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When the digital pull felt too strong, when my hand was literally reaching for the phone, I had to shock my nervous system back into the physical world. I used the grounding blueprint. 5 things I can see. The grain of the wood on my desk, the dust motes in the light, the blue of my curtains. 4 things I can feel. The weight of my feet on the carpet, the texture of my shirt, the cool air from the vent. 3 things I can hear. The distant hum of traffic, my own heartbeat, the wind in the eaves. 2 things I can smell. The fading scent of my morning coffee, the smell of old books. 1 thing I can taste. The minty linger of my toothpaste. By the time I reached 1, my brain had been hijacked back from the fantasy world and planted firmly in reality. I wasn't in the dark anymore. I was in my room, and I was safe. Sarah and the architecture of trust. Then there was Sarah. In the before times, I treated relationships like Maya treated her buildings. I cared about the exterior. I wanted to look like the perfect boyfriend. But the more I recovered, the more I realized that true intimacy is built on structural honesty. One night, about 6 months into our relationship, we were sitting on the porch of her apartment. The air was cool, and the conversation had drifted into our past. I could have lied. I could have given her the edited version of Alex Bennett. But I looked at her, and I saw a person who deserved the truth. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "there's a part of my story that's hard to tell. I'm a recovering addict." The silence that followed felt like it lasted a century. I expected her to pull away. I expected the coldest skyline look. Instead, she took my hand. "What does recovery look like for you today?" she asked. Not, "What did you do?" or "Why did you do it?" but "How are you building yourself now?" I told her about the group, the blog, and the red light system. I told her that some days I'm the architect, and some days I'm just a guy trying to keep the roof from leaking. She became my co-designer. We established boundaries. She didn't judge my halt checks, she encouraged them. She learned that if I was quiet or restless, it wasn't about her, it was about the weather inside my head. Through Sarah, I learned that sex isn't a commodity to be consumed in private. It's a language of connection to be shared in the light. She taught me that the most erotic thing in the world isn't an image on a screen. It's being truly known by another person and still being wanted. If you're reading or listening to this, and you're afraid that your truth will make you unlovable, I want you to know that the right person won't be scared of your cracks. They'll be the ones who help you fill them with gold, like that old Japanese pottery. You aren't broken. You're just being rebuilt.